The biggest buildup followed by a letdown in Minnesota sports history. So it's interesting because on Friday I started preparing for what I was going to talk about in today's podcast. And after that swing and a miss on Sunday by the Minnesota Timberwolves for what looked like they were on the verge of possibly acquiring former guard of the Brooklyn Nets, Deangelo Russell, after that happened, I said, I'm going to push what I was going to talk about today for later on in the week. And I asked you guys out on Sunday night on my personal YouTube page, Twitter page, and Facebook page. I put a poll out on all three platforms. What is the biggest buildup followed by a letdown in Minnesota sports history? So the buildup is key into all of this to where you felt comfortable and all of a sudden your sports season was ruined. The year was over. So the four options to choose from were missing out on Deangelo Russell, Blair Walsh, wide left, Gary Anderson, 98, and 38-7 losing to the Eagles in 2017 NFC Championship game after the Minneapolis Miracle play. So when you added up all of the votes across all three platforms, coming in at number one with a considerable margin was Gary Anderson. Number two, 38-7. Number three, wide left. And fourth came in with Deangelo Russell. So, and I'll give my personal vote as far as the worst one out of all this that let me down the most. But starting with Gary Anderson, that came in at number one for you guys. And I completely get it. I didn't start following this team until 2 years after, but I did some digging into this to figure out the buildup as far as the letdown, how it could just be just such a huge letdown. And the 98 Vikings, they had a 15-1 record to finish the regular season. And Gary Anderson, to my surprise, hadn't missed a kick all season long. At one point made 46 straight field goals. And they were up 27-20 against the Atlanta Falcons with just over 2 minutes left in the NFC Championship game in 98 before Gary Anderson lined up to kick. And I'm sure as a Vikings fan, you probably were sitting there looking and thinking to yourself, he's going to make this kick. He's the best kicker in the league. We're going to the Super Bowl. I'm about to call my friends and family. Let's start organizing the party. And the commentators, I watched the video, the play-by-play guy and the color commentator, I don't remember who it was that was calling that game, but they were talking about it and they were predicting Gary Anderson. You got to think he's going to make it. He's missed 0 kicks all of this season, and they're going to go to the Super Bowl, and everything's going to be great. And let this be a lesson to all the commentators out there that are calling games. Stop talking about how great kickers are when they're lining up to kick, because once you do that, it's guaranteed that they are going to miss it. And instead of going up by 10, which pretty much would have sealed the deal, the Falcons, they recovered and scored. They tied the game up 27-all before going into overtime, before their Anderson kicker, Morton Anderson, kicked the field goal in overtime and sent the Falcons to the Super Bowl, and the Viking season was suddenly over. What a letdown that was. And I don't feel that pain because, again, I wasn't around for that, but I tried to quantify it and equate it. And for me, I'm a Dallas Mavericks fan, and the way that I can compare this best to where I started to feel it a little bit, like I get it, I can feel it a little bit. Dirk Nowitzki is one of the greatest players of all time. He's part of the 50-40-90 club, so I forgot what season it was, but at least once in his career, he hit 50% of his field goals, shooting from the field overall, 40% from deep, and 90% from the free throw line. So to compare that with, let's say the Mavericks were to face the San Antonio Spurs in the Western Conference Finals, Game 7, 5 seconds left. Dirk Nowitzki, he gets fouled, and one of the greatest free throw shooters of all time. And all you got to do, you're up by 3 points, 5 seconds left. All you got to do is make one of them, and you win. You go to the NBA Finals, and there's nothing to talk about. Instead, Dirk Nowitzki, he misses both of them. The Spurs, they get the rebound, toss it up to Tony Parker. He makes a wide-open three, sends the game in overtime, and the Spurs, they win in overtime, and the Mavericks season is over. That's the best way that I could compare it, and that sucks for you guys. I'm sorry you guys had to go through that. So I totally understand why that's number one. And it's funny because on Facebook, a couple of you guys mentioned 41-0. I completely forgot about it. I'll consider that an honorable mention because 41-0. It depends on who you ask, like which type of Vikings fan that you ask that will tell you how disappointed they were with it. Because if you were around in 98 where you saw the Gary Anderson missed kick to where in 2000, 2 years later, 41-0 against the New York Giants where their quarterback was Kerry freaking Collins and they were guarding Randy Moss with guys like Jason Sehorn. The Vikings should have freaking won that game. But if you were around for 98 and then you saw that 2000 NFC Championship game, 41-0, I can understand if you're saying typical Vikings, all you do is break our hearts and screw up. I don't get why I invest my soul into this team every single year. Whereas me, that was the first year I followed that team. That was my first experience of Vikings, of watching the Vikings in the playoffs. So for the 98 guys, for the guys that were around in 98, oh, typical Vikings. For me, my first experience watching this team, I said, this is disappointing. This kind of sucks, but they'll get better. Little did I know. So that's an honorable mention. Number 2, Blair Walsh. And I get the build-up. Adrian Peterson fumbled the ball. All of our points came from field goals. I don't care that all of our points came from field goals. A 27-yard kick, as a professional football kicker, you should make that damn kick. But Adrian Peterson, he fumbled the ball. It looked like that the Vikings were trying to give the game away. They were trying to lose that game every which way possible. And all of a sudden, the Vikings had a chance to win. And the difference, the reason why I'm not even going to consider that as a letdown for me, because I watched this in real time, and this was before I started doing these video podcasts. I watched that game in real time, and I said to myself, he's going to miss that kick. Because for the last year or year and a half, I was calling for Blair Walsh's job. I said, this dude is going to cost this franchise a game, possibly in the playoffs. You cannot trust him. And what happened? He missed. And even though I knew he was going to miss, I still had an out-of-body experience because I didn't want to be right. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted the Vikings to advance past Seattle, and he missed it. And I had an out-of-body experience. I damn near passed out. I knew he was going to miss, but it's still like, oh, he really, really missed it. Really? I wanted to be wrong. So that's why I'm not even mad, because I knew he was going to miss. And number 3, Deangelo Russell. That's what's really interesting. You want to talk about a buildup? Let's break it down right now. So this started when the Brooklyn Nets, they got commitment from Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Jordan to join the Brooklyn Nets. So naturally, Deangelo Russell was no longer going to be on the team, to where if they were going to get something for him, he was a restricted free agent at the time, they were going to do a sign and trade. And the Minnesota Timberwolves and Gerson Rosas, and I get it, you didn't get Deangelo Russell, and I know Wolves fans, you're upset, you're ticked off, and I get it. I felt so bad for you guys because I was really, really excited for you guys. It looked like all the stars aligned for you guys to get Deangelo Russell, but Gerson Rosas is very aggressive. He was very aggressive in this, and I like his mindset, whereas past leadership, past front office, executive members of the Wolves, they would kind of sit idly by and say, well, we did the best we could. You could tell Rosas is working his ass off, and I think the Wolves have a bright future, but Kyrie, KD, and DeAndre Jordan, they committed to the Brooklyn Nets, so Deangelo Russell was up for a sign and trade. And then it got reported that the Lakers and the Wolves were the two teams that were really, really interested in acquiring Deangelo Russell. And what was interesting, the reason why the Wolves had the advantage against the Lakers was, and to this point right now, up until the point of the recording of this podcast, and maybe into tomorrow, I have no idea, the Lakers were, or at least still are, waiting on a decision by Kawhi Leonard. So for the Lakers, Deangelo Russell was option number 2. That was the fallback plan if Kawhi Leonard decided not to go to the Lakers. For the Wolves, Deangelo Russell was priority number 1. So the Wolves had the advantage over the Lakers because of time. They had time on their side because Kawhi Leonard was taking forever. And then Karl Anthony Towns and Deangelo Russell, you know that they're friends, they're buddies, and he posted, Kat did on Instagram, a picture of loading, like a picture of a loading error screen or something like that, and hinting at Deangelo Russell because his nickname is Deloading, and I really hope I really wish, I know it's not going to stop, but I really wish athletes would stop posting subtweets or sub posts like that without things being official or before things actually happen, because then that makes the letdown much more disappointing. But I absolutely get it. And then what else? What else do we have here? It looked like that it was going to happen. It was between the Wolves and the Lakers, to where, okay, the only thing that's stopping this move from happening for the Wolves is you need to find a team to dump your bad contracts off, primarily Andrew Wiggins. And there was a team now before, up until this point. So I've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now on the extended audio podcast. I'll put the link on SoundCloud in the description of this video so you guys can find it there. But I said this is going to be tough for the Wolves to do. But the one team that emerged on Sunday that I was like, man, this team might actually do it, was the New York Knicks, because they were all in on Kyrie Irving, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, one of those guys, and they're not getting any of them, to where if any team is stupid enough to trade for Andrew Wiggins as a consolation prize to send a message to the fans, hey, at least we got Andrew Wiggins, it would be the New York Knicks. And it didn't pan out, because out of nowhere, the Warriors swooped in. Shams reported this. The Warriors are now suitors for Deangelo Russell. And I said, what? The Warriors? Where did they come? Really? Are they going to play tiny ball? Klay Thompson coming off an ACL tear. You're going to make him an undersized 3 small forward? I don't really get that. I don't think they're not going to do that, really. Sure enough, 5 or 10 minutes later, the Warriors have acquired Deangelo Russell in a sign and trade, and I felt so bad for you guys. I was ready to do a video podcast. I don't do video podcasts on the Wolves very often, but I was ready to do it for you guys. I was very excited, because this was where a franchise was in such despair, to where they were going to be, if they acquired Deangelo Russell, the Wolves, they were going to be competitive in the Western Conference. It would have changed everything. And to think that the Wolves were D'Lo's number one destination where he wanted to go, that's nuts, to where, oh, the Wolves, they're a destination now. I felt so bad. So that completely sucks. The Wolves, they were on the build. Talk about a buildup, bro. That was crazy. So I feel bad for you guys. But number one for me, the biggest letdown after a solid buildup in Minnesota sports history is 38-7. I don't think there's any competition for me. For you guys that watched 98, I get it. For me, it's 38-7. That Minneapolis Miracle play at the time validated it righted all the wrongs that we went through in Vikings Nation. 41-0. 2009 NFC Championship game when the Saints cheated. 2010 when you thought that they were going to pick up where they left off and they didn't make the playoffs. And if I'm not mistaken, Sidney Rice, I'm going to look this up. Oh, my goodness. I'm going to look this up after this podcast. I hope I'm right about it. If I'm wrong, okay, whatever. If I'm not mistaken, Sidney Rice, who was our best receiver in 2009, and, oh, he's coming back. He waited until the 11th hour to get surgery or something like that, because he was waiting for a contract. 2010 was such a screw-up. And then 2015, wide left. 2016, you start off 5-0. You think this is a championship caliber team. They finish 8-8 and they miss the playoffs. And then the Minneapolis Miracle play. Normally that's a play that happens against us, but instead it happened for us. And I thought, this franchise is finally turning the corner. They're going to be able to win the big games. And Nick Foles, that's what we have to look forward to. Nick Foles and the Eagles, who barely beat the Atlanta Falcons at their house. I'll take my chances with the Vikings. I knew it was going to be a tough game. I'll take my chances with the Minnesota Vikings, and they didn't show up. Dog, they didn't show up at all. They didn't show up at all. I was thinking, oh, they're going to go to the Super Bowl. They may not win it, but they're going to be competitive, and it's going to be great. Even if they lose, it's going to be a great story. And I sat there and watched that NFC Championship game like just in shock. Really? You really followed up the Minneapolis Miracle play with that piece of crap? And now it's to the point now where anytime I see replays of the Minneapolis Miracle play, I turn the channel. I don't want to see it again, because I automatically think of the week after that when they got their head gaskets blown off of the damn car. I compare it to a guy that gets the phone number of a girl that's way out of his league, only for her to not show up on a date, and she blocks you from texting or calling her to find out what happened. Oh, there's something happened. Let's reschedule. You never hear from her again. That, to me, is the biggest build-up followed followed by a letdown in Minnesota sports history, but I get it for you guys that followed the team in 98. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments section. You can rank it, or if you have different thoughts, let me know if I'm wrong about Sidney Rice. I was so ticked off with that dude, bro. Oh, he made me so mad. We do this 3 times a week. Realistic Randy, with mediocre best with Realistic Randy. You can check me on Twitter at realistic_Randy, Facebook at Realistic Randy. You can follow my personal YouTube channel. Just search Realistic Randy, and you'll find it there. We'll see you later on this week.